Hello and welcome to the first episode of Clearing the Smoke, the podcast to help you clear your mind and clear your lungs. And I am your host, Albert Daniel C. Zara. And for our first episode, we will be discussing in depth the effects of smoking in our body and in our mind. Now, it is a no-brainer that smoking is bad. I mean, we see it everywhere, especially as graphic reminders of its effects in cigarette packs and in anti-smoking commercials that we see on TV. But do we ever stop to think how it actually works? How it actually causes those effects? Yes, that is right. We are going to be discussing and understanding smoking and how it affects our bodies and minds. So if you don't mind me rambling about anatomy, then stick around. And if you don't, it's alright. So sit back, relax, and as always, thank you for tuning in. So to give you guys an idea of how dangerous smoking can be, let's start us off by spitting some cold hard facts and a little optimism in the end. Did you know that according to a survey done by the World Health Organization in 2022, they found that tobacco kills more than 8 million people per year, with 7 million of those deaths being smokers themselves, while the roughly 1.2 million are non-smokers exposed to secondhand smoke. And in a survey done by the Global Adult Tobacco Survey in 2021, they found that 1 in 5, or roughly 15.1 million Filipino adults aged 15 years or older smoke tobacco, and an estimated 2.5 million non-tobacco users are exposed to secondhand smoke, with 62.3% of the respondents being exposed to secondhand smoke in bars or clubs. But surprisingly, they also found that 16.8 million people are being exposed to secondhand smoke in their homes. And more surprisingly, around 12.2 million people are exposed to smoke in public transport areas. Yes, you heard that right. People are being exposed to secondhand smoke more in their homes than public places filled with vehicles. And yes, you know that iconic tricycle jeepney smoke smell that we commuters love as we ride home tired from school or work. But I digress. And while smoking is obviously still a prevalent issue here in the Philippines, the situation has actually improved. As a matter of fact, a survey done by the Philippine Statistic Authority, they found that people aged 15 and below have reduced their tobacco use by 19.5% in 2021, which is a huge improvement compared to the 23.8% in 2015 and 29.7% in 2009. So yes, we are basically seeing a decline in tobacco use within our teenage peers. Furthermore, in the same survey, they also found that 68.0% of the respondents actually quit because of the increasing prices of cigarettes. While it is great to see improvement in our society, it is nonetheless still an issue that affects our populace, and we must work together to put an end to smoking as a whole. And you can contribute by following this podcast, or we can just wait until cigarettes become really expensive in the future. Just kidding. Moving on. Now, how does smoking damage our lungs exactly? According to the Narayana Health, smoking damages our lungs in mainly 3 ways. 1 is inflammation, 2 is by excessive mucus production, and 3 is by reduced cilia. Smoking causes our lungs to be inflamed as the smoke irritates the lining of the airways, which triggers the release of the chemicals necessary to repair the damage done by the smoke. Now, while inflammation isn't as bad as it's basically the body's response to the damage done by irritants, repeated exposure and too much inflammation, however, can cause swelling and narrowing of the lungs' airways, as well as damaging the lungs' tissue, making it hard for the air to flow as well as to breathe. According to Verywell Health, persistent lung inflammation can cause damage to airways and lung tissues, and these symptoms include fatigue, wheezing, shortness of breath, wet productive or non-productive cough, easy exhaustion with physical exertion, chest discomfort, pain, or tightness. Aside from inflammation, smoking obviously reduces our lungs' function, as due to the narrow airways, damaged tissue, and the reduction of the amount of oxygen that the lungs can exchange. Smoke reduces our lungs' functions by destroying the small air sacs in the lungs called alveoli, which are responsible for exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide. And when these sacs are damaged, the lungs lose their ability to effectively absorb oxygen, thus leading to shortness of breath or reduced lung capacity. Furthermore, smoking contributes to excessive mucus production. This occurs due to the smoke damaging the tiny hair-like structures inside the lungs called cilia, which helps move mucus and other debris out of the lungs. And when you smoke, the cilia becomes damaged and thus becomes less effective in moving out the mucus. Now, some of you are asking, why is mucus so important? Well, according to Frontiers, it's basically the lungs' main defense mechanism. And if there's an issue with the mucus or cilia, the airways can become blocked and trap the chemicals and particles caught by the mucus inside the lungs. So whenever we cough, it moves up the airway where it is either swallowed or spitted out. We're basically expelling or spitting the harmful particles out of our body, and when the cilia are damaged, it would be harder to spit the mucus out. Okay, so aside from our lungs, smoking can also damage our heart. Generally, smoking affects our heart by damaging our blood vessels and restricting its flow by forming plaque. In an article by Better Health, the heart produces fatty deposits known as plaque inside the coronary arteries over time, and it is plaque that reduces the flow of blood to the heart that increases the risk of heart attack, and smoking speeds up the clogging and narrowing of the arteries. Aside from excess production of plaque, heart attacks can also occur due to smoking. According to the British Heart Foundation, the chemicals in cigarettes makes the wall of the artery sticky and causes the fatty material such as plaque to stick to the walls. As this accumulates, the material begins to clog your arteries or the blood's path and block the flow of the blood entirely. And two things can happen. If the arteries that carry blood to your heart get clogged, you get a heart attack. But if the arteries to your brain clogs, you get a stroke. Now, according to the CDC, the chemicals found in cigarette smoke cause the cells that line the blood vessels to become swollen and inflamed, which makes it hard for oxygen and blood to flow through, and this can lead to various cardiovascular conditions such as atherosclerosis, coronary heart disease, stroke, peripheral arterial disease or PAD, and abdominal aortic aneurysm. First, let's begin with atherosclerosis, in which arteries narrow and become less flexible due to the buildup of fat, cholesterol, or any substances in the blood, which form plaque around the walls of arteries, which blocks the blood from flowing properly to the various parts of the body. And it is smoking that increases the formation of plaque in blood vessels. Next is coronary heart disease, which is when the chemicals of the cigarette smoke cause the blood to thicken and form clots inside the veins and arteries. The clots are so thick that it blocks the pathway of the blood to the heart muscle and can lead to a heart attack or worse, sudden death. Next is stroke, which is the loss of brain function due to the lack of blood flow within the brain. Strokes can cause permanent brain damage or death. Next is peripheral arterial disease or PAD, which is when the blood vessels have become so narrow due to the clotting and plaque that the flow of the blood to the limbs is reduced and the cells and tissues are deprived of the needed oxygen. And finally, we have abdominal aortic aneurysm, which is the bulge or swelling in the portion of the aorta in the abdomen, and becomes weak. The aorta is the main blood vessel or artery responsible for carrying oxygen-rich blood throughout the body. Smoking can cause damage to the wall of the abdominal aorta and cause an aneurysm, and when left untreated, it can burst and cause life-threatening bleeding. Aside from our hearts, smoking can also affect the way we think. And these effects include reduced cognitive function, increased risk of addiction, as well as being more susceptible to neurodegenerative diseases. So how does this happen? Smoking reduces our cognitive function by damaging the white and gray matter of the brain, with the white matter being the part of the brain containing the axons, which are these long, thin fibers inside our brains that connect different neurons and allow them to communicate with one another. And this damage leads to the reduced brain function. Now, in a recent study done in April 2023 by researchers at the University of Science and Technology of China, they have identified patterns of brain connectivity as smoking causes white matter lesions. And these lesions basically serve as biomarkers to help them find the differences between healthy and addicted brains. They found that smokers have low small worldness and a normalized clustering coefficient. Now, small worldness is basically the brain's ability to communicate and transmit information, while clustering coefficient describes the neuron's connectivity within the brain. So this means that the smokers' brains are less efficient in communicating and integrating information, while a normalized clustering coefficient means that smokers' brains have less connection between their neurons. Furthermore, in 2017, a study done by Frontiers suggests that the damage done by long-term smoking to the white matter's integrity is linked to why smokers are having difficulty quitting and why quitting programs have low efficacy. The study also found that smoking increases brain responses and strengthens the fiber connection, which leads to the compulsive and habitual behaviors. And this effect was found more prominently in adults whose brains are still developing. So basically, smoking literally rewires your brain and alters it to the point that your brain wants you to smoke and turns it into a habit. Additionally, a study done in 2013 called Smokers' Decision Making, More Than Mere Risk Taking, found that smokers inhibit less self-control, which leads them to make rewarding, albeit risky decisions. Now, during the study, they tasked both smokers and non-smokers to partake in BART, or the Balloon Analog Risk Task, where they are given the choice of either inflating a virtual balloon or moving on to the next one, with each inflation resulting in the increase of money in the balloon. However, with each inflation comes at an increasing risk of explosion, which would lead to loss of earnings. But if they choose to move on to the next balloon, they earn all the money that was earned inside the balloon. Through this test, they found that smokers are more inclined to inflate the balloon despite the risks, as they are easily swayed by the idea of earning more money with the inflate strategy. And with this analysis, it suggests that smokers' attraction to the typically favorable outcome might drive their risk-taking in these tasks. Furthermore, they found that smokers are more likely to partake in risky behavior other than tobacco use, as they would be more involved in traffic accidents, less likely to wear seatbelts, and partake in risky sexual behavior, as well as finding that smoking is associated with impulsivity, psychoticism, defensive optimism, which is basically gaslighting yourself into thinking that the situation isn't as bad as it is realistically presented, and sensation seeking. And aside from risky behavior and poor decision making, smokers also exhibit addiction. An article made by the National Institute of Drug Abuse, or NIDA, states that the way nicotine works is by stimulating the adrenal glands, which results in the discharge of adrenaline, which basically gives cigarette their kick. It is in this rush of adrenaline that stimulates the body and causes an increase in blood pressure, respiration, and heart rate, as well as activating the reward pathways, which are responsible for regulating reinforcement and feelings of pleasure. The activation of the reward pathways temporarily reduces the anxiety, and once the nicotine rush wears off, the user becomes more anxious and craves for more cigarettes, and thus the cycle continues. Now, if some of you are wondering or worrying if that's the case, does secondhand smoke affect us? Unfortunately, yes, and prolonged exposure is as bad as smoking itself. You're basically exposing yourself to the same chemicals found in direct smoking, and considering how big our country's smoker population is, especially in urban areas, it's going to be hard, but not impossible, as there are still ways to avoid secondhand smoke, but more on that later. Aside from affecting our internal organs, smoking can also affect our appearance. It is known to cause premature aging, wherein it damages the DNA in our skin cells, which leads to the breakdown of collagen and elastin, which are two proteins that keep our skin firm and elastic. And when these are broken down, our skin becomes less firm and elastic and develops into wrinkles. Furthermore, smoking also constricts blood vessels, reducing blood flow and oxygen to the skin, which makes it appear dull. In addition, the amount of vitamin C in our bodies is also reduced, which is an important antioxidant that helps protect our skin from damage caused by free radicals, which are basically atoms that can damage our cells, like the chemicals found in smoke. Excuse me. So, now it's time for a little lightning round of other effects to our appearance. So, according to Medical News Today, these effects include delayed wound healing, skin disorders such as psoriasis, inflammatory skin diseases such as acne, facial wrinkles such as lines around the lips, dry, dull, and gray skin, yellowing fingers and fingernails, stained teeth, cataracts. Whew, oh my god, that was a mouthful. So yeah, if you don't want to look like you're 50 while still being in your 20s, it's high time to quit. And with all of that out of the way, I will now provide a general overview about some more diseases caused by smoking. So for starters, we'll begin with one of the more common and well-known diseases, which is COPD, or chronic pulmonary obstruction disease. Now, COPD isn't just one disease, but is actually a group of diseases, with two of them being the most common, which are chronic bronchitis and emphysema. COPD is a progressive lung disease that makes it hard to breathe. It is developed over years of exposure or breathing in irritants such as pollution, fumes, or in this case, cigarette smoke, and in some cases, COPD can be genetic. According to an article by Mount Sinai, COPD is a combination of a cough that won't go away called bronchitis and lung damage called emphysema. According to the CDC, symptoms of COPD include frequent cough or wheezing, excessive phlegm, mucus or sputum production, shortness of breath, and trouble taking a deep breath. Moving on, we have lung cancer. According to the Cancer Research UK, the way this works is that chemicals produced by cigarette smoke enter our lungs, and these chemicals damage the DNA, including the parts that protect us from cancer. And essentially, it makes it hard for the cells to repair the DNA damage, and it is this damage that causes the cancer in the cell. Furthermore, Mayo Clinic states that at first, the body is able to repair the damage, but when this happens repeatedly, the normal cells that line the lungs are so damaged that over time, the damage would cause the normal cells to act abnormally and develop into a cancer. And according to the CDC, symptoms include coughing that gets worse or doesn't go away, chest pain, shortness of breath, wheezing, coughing up blood, feeling very tired all the time, weight loss with no known cause. And then finally, we have stroke. Now, according to the CDC, A stroke occurs when the blood supply to the brain is blocked or a blood vessel in the brain bursts, which damages or kills parts of the brain and are characterized by disabilities such as paralysis, muscle weakness, trouble speaking, and memory loss. The article then states that the way smoking causes stroke is by making the blood sticky and more likely to clot, which blocks the blood flow to the heart and the brain. In addition to that, it damages the cells that line the blood vessels. It increases plaque buildup, narrow and thickened blood vessels, and all of these combined ensures that the brain doesn't receive the blood it needs. Now that I've laid out the harmful effects of smoking, what are some ways on how we can quit smoking or protect ourselves from secondhand smoke? But before we delve deep into that, let me have a water break and this was such a mouthful. Alright, see you guys in a bit. Okay, I'm back. Now, if you're someone who's looking to quit, first of all, thank you for discovering this little podcast of mine. How are you doing? Now, the best way to quit smoking is to seek professional help, as they would provide you with the proper counseling and routine to help you beat your addiction. Yes, it will be a long journey, but it is highly worth it, both for you and the people around you. But if you can't afford it, here are some ways as a non-smoker that I hope can help you out. First is acknowledging your issue and being honest yourself. Because sometimes admitting that you have a problem is one of the best ways to establish this foundation to solving your problem. Another way is to exercise, which not only helps build discipline, but is also a great way to improve your health and also get some sick gains in. Yeah, hell yeah. Another way is to pick up a hobby. For me, I've always found hobbies to be really helpful in distracting myself from things. I found it to be a great way to not only express myself but to also use my energy or direct my energy into something more productive. So try learning how to. So essentially you want to direct your energy towards something productive. Like that's the main idea whenever you get a hobby. You want to do something that's productive, and you direct your energy to something that is not smoking. Or, which is one of the best ways, is to get help by the quit line called Stop Smoke, which is set up by DOH. You can call this quit line by texting 165534. So moving on, while in regards to secondhand smoke, considering our country has a population of 15.1 million smokers as of 21, according to the Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department, it would be best to just move to another country. Just kidding. There are ways to avoid secondhand smoke. Some are definitely going to be pricey, and there are some that are budget friendly. Protecting ourselves from secondhand smoke, on the other hand, is not that easy, considering our country has a population of smokers. But if it's not cigarette smoke that you have to worry about, it's the smoke coming from other sources like vehicles. So secondhand smoke is not entirely avoidable in that case. But there are still ways that you can do to help protect yourself, or the very least reduce the effects of secondhand smoke. One is to wear a mask. Now, the masks that we wear during COVID aren't entirely effective. Like they're disposable. They're disposable, and they use this very thin material that's not really effective in filtering smoke. Now, what I want you to use are N95 masks, or any filter mask that you can use. Now, okay, they are going to be very uncomfortable whenever you use them in public. But if you want to keep yourself safe from secondhand smoke, I highly suggest using N95 masks. Now, another way is to adopt a healthy lifestyle like exercising regularly or having a balanced diet. This is another way to reduce the negative effects of secondhand smoke. So, okay, if you want to have a smoke-free home, here are some ways that you can do. First is installing a ventilation. Installing ventilation is a great way to smoke-proof your house. You can buy ventilation or exhaust fan units in stores like Handyman or 3M, or in online shops like Shopee or Lazada, and would usually run you back from around roughly 500 pesos to 1,000 plus pesos, and an added 500 pesos per day depending on how long the labor will it take. And that's all I know. If you want more information regarding guidelines on installing in ventilation, I highly suggest reading the Department of Labor and Employment's or DOLI's document regarding the ventilation of workplace, which they use for COVID-19. And I will provide you guys with a link for the document below. Trust me, it's not a virus. Okay, so another way is to buy an air purifier. Air purifiers that I found in Shopee would usually cost around 800 plus to 2,000 plus without the shipping. And if you can afford it, I highly suggest buying air purifiers to help improve the air quality in your home. Although if you're looking to buy one, I highly recommend buying one with a HEPA filter or high efficiency particulate filter. Yeah, as they are considered to be the most effective at removing airborne particles. Aside from HEPA, activated carbon and ionizers are also good alternatives. They will cost a lot, but they are definitely worth every penny if you want to prevent smoke around your home. This, combined with proper ventilation and of course, home maintenance, can greatly help in reducing indoor smoke. If you can't afford ventilation and air purifiers, there are still some ways on how you can create a partially smoke-free home. Mind you, these are not full solutions to the problem and are basically just temporary fixes to a bigger issue. One way is to clean your house, as dust, dirt, and other particles found in the air can trap smoke, which makes it easier for smoke to spread and remain around your homes as they would settle in these said particles. Furthermore, whenever smoke is present, they can be absorbed by your upholstery. Fabrics such as curtains and clothes, walls, ceilings, and furniture, which creates a stench, and if left unattended, it would make it really difficult to remove the unpleasant stench, and will definitely reduce the indoor air quality. So to prevent this, we need to regularly clean and dust our home surfaces and furniture, as well as washing our fabrics. If you live in a smoky environment, like an urban area, it would be better to close your windows, although this may not be an effective plan as smoke can still seep in through the cracks. Now, another way is to place plants around your house, although your mileage will vary. In an article done by the American Lung Association in 2017, they stated that plants can be beneficial but at the same time don't do that much good. If you're thinking about the 1989 NASA study that stated that plants can clean the air in indoor environments, well, I got some news for you. We don't live in the same environment as NASA does. Yes, the article disproved the 1989 study by stating that what works well for a space station doesn't translate well into the average home. They took into consideration the fact that they were using their own test chambers to test their hypothesis. And ask yourself, do we live in space station test chambers? So the bottom line is what works well in a NASA lab doesn't work in our home. However, recent studies seem to support the use of potted plants, albeit with a little help. A study done in 2022 by the International Journal of Low Carbon Technologies found that potted plants combined with ventilations effectively remove pollutants from tobacco smoke. Now, the way that they did this was that they didn't use the more sophisticated test chambers like in NASA. They basically tried to emulate a regular home. So basically, this system combines the plant's phytoremediation, or its abilities to efficiently absorb pollutants in the air, water, and soil, and ventilation to increase the rate of removal of the pollutants. Furthermore, the plants were able to effectively absorb carbon dioxide and formaldehyde, both chemicals found in cigarettes, with the help of ventilation. So essentially, ventilation accelerated the removal of pollutants. The removal efficiency of pollutants in the ventilated chamber with plants was higher than those in the closed chamber with plants. The removal efficiency was stable after 6 hours in the ventilated chamber with plants, while it may take longer than 12 hours in the closed chamber with the plants. Although for this experiment, they use highly effective plants to conduct this experiment, and their ability to remove pollutants will vary from species to species. For this experiment, they used a plant called Epipremnum aureum, or the devil's ivy, which they described to be one of the most common potted plants that are effective in absorbing pollutants, and these plants were highly maintained. With all these in mind, using potted plants alone should not be treated as this end-all be-all solution to indoor smoke. Instead, they should be used in conjunction with other ways or methods to smoke-proof your house. Avoiding secondhand smoke is a complex issue wherein one method is not enough to solve it, and it is a big but worthwhile investment if you want to keep you and your loved ones safe. So those are some ways on how you can create a smoke-free environment in your own homes. Of course, this is going to differ for a lot of people. Some will find this info helpful, while others won't. And that's alright, as long as you're able to keep yourself safe from secondhand smoke with proven and veritable methods. And I think that this is a good time to end this episode. But before I do, I want to tell you guys a little personal story. It happened way back when I was in junior high. I had this schoolmate who had a lot of vices, and it was basically common knowledge that he smokes and drinks. So yeah, me and him would have some small talk from time to time, and he was kinda a decent guy. I mean, granted, we didn't really know each other very well, but yeah, we talked from time to time and interacted. My friend, who was actually classmates with this guy, would tell me stories of how he would just walk inside the classroom smelling like cigarettes, and how his classmates would just bombard him with perfume. And at one time where he just slept in the corner of the classroom with his eyes just wide open. It was definitely something, and it's my first time seeing someone just sleep with his eyes open. Yeah, that happened. But the weird thing is that I kind of felt bad for him. Like, I know that, some of it was his choice, but I keep thinking that maybe he could still turn his life around. I mean, he studies in one of the most prestigious schools in the Philippines, so surely he's got something. But yeah, I kind of think about what are the choices he made in his life that led to everything. And I hope that he's still doing fine out there. With that, I want to leave you guys with a little piece of advice. And that it's never too late. Even if you just started smoking or are deep into it, it's never too late to quit. And always remember, guys, that you all have the potential to be great, and that smoking or just any vice is stopping you from reaching it. No matter how hard it is to quit, just remember that life is too short to waste it all on smoking, and smoking should never define how you live. So if you want to live your best life and do everything that you want, it's time to quit. And this concludes today's episode. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for tuning in for today's episode, and I hope that this was both an enjoyable and informative experience for all of you. And if you want to see more episodes, please give this video a like and hit the subscribe button. And as always, take care. Okay, but before I really go, Stay tuned for our next episode coming on Tuesday, May 16, which we're gonna talk about the social and financial effects of smoking, the financial toll of smoking, and how like smoking related illnesses affects our finances, as well as the historical background of tobacco usage, as well as the advertising tactics and marketing that was used by tobacco industry. So yeah, that's all, and stay tuned for next episode. Thank you for listening, guys. Take care. Woo.